Okay, am I jacked in like case? I think I am. Greetings, dear listeners. The following account of the cruel murder of Pearl Bryan by Scott Jackson and Alonzo Walling is largely taken from an old true crime book, Blood in the Parlor. Blood in the Parlor, by a most engaging writer named Dorothy Dunbar. Pearl Bryan is also the subject of the murder ballad called, aptly enough, Pearl Bryan. I found it in another old book called The Viking Book of Folk Ballads of the English-Speaking World, edited by Albert B. Friedman. Here's the backstory of the murder of Pearl Bryan. On February the 1st, 1896, John Hewling, who worked on the Lock Farm in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, across the Ohio River from Cincinnati, discovered the dead body of a young woman. The body was covered by a pale green dress with a black check pattern. Pale green with black checks, and when the dress was removed, the young woman was found to be missing her head. According to a local newspaper, the Cincinnati Post, the woman is young, and her form is that of a Venus. An intensive search was then mounted to find out who she was, and to find her head. The authorities had a lot of candidates to choose from, since, according to Dorothy Dunbar, some 24 young women had been reported missing. The post-mortem revealed that the victim died after 10:30 p.m. on Friday night, as there had been a heavy downpour earlier in the evening, but the corpse had not been exposed to the rain. It also revealed that she had been drugged with cocaine, but was still alive at the time of her decapitation, as shown by cuts to her hands as she tried to fight off her assassin. She was also 5 months pregnant. 5 months pregnant. The detectives' first break came when they learned that the victim's shoes had been sold in Greencastle, Indiana. There, they were able to identify the victim as Pearl Bryan, a vivacious strawberry blonde with a shapely figure. Pearl was apparently in love with Scott Jackson, a student at the Ohio Dental College in Cincinnati, and had even been seen holding hands with him in public. Daring behavior for 1896. Jackson lived in Greencastle with his mother and a sister who was married to Dr. Edwin Past, Latin professor at Greencastle's DePauw University, which is Margaret Mead's alma mater. It's also Dan Quayle's. Jackson's family put him in the top tier of local society, a handsome, dashing man with blue eyes, a blonde mustache, and a pleasing voice. But Jackson had a somewhat checkered past. He had been suspected of embezzling funds from a previous employer, told crude jokes, and sometimes drank a little too much. And this was 1896, remember? Acting on a tip that Pearl's cousin, Billy Woods, had been sending telegrams to Jackson, detectives went to South Bend, Indiana, in order to confront him. Woods admitted Pearl was pregnant and that he had informed Jackson, who told him to have her come to him in Cincinnati. Woods felt some responsibility for the situation, as he was the one who had introduced them to each other. Pearl lied and told her parents she was going to Indianapolis to visit friends, but she went instead to Cincinnati, where she expected marriage, but found murder and decapitation instead. Evidence and many witnesses soon implicated Jackson and his roommate, fellow dental student Alonzo Walling, and they were both arrested for Pearl's murder. In an attempt to force a confession from Jackson, the authorities took him to the funeral parlor where Pearl's headless body lay in coffin and confronted him with the dead girl's father, brother, and sister. According to Dorothy Dunbar, Pearl's sister, Mabel Stanley, went down on her knees before the accused murderer and cried out, "Tell me what you've done with poor baby's head. Think of her mother, if nothing else. I'm going to her tonight, and I want to tell her where baby's head is." Jackson's answer, "I can't tell you anything about it." Walling, who was also there, stood mute. After the murder, Jackson and Walling had checked a valise with a heavy object inside at two separate saloons. One saloon keeper even thought it had a bowling ball inside it. Upon examination by police, bloodstains and blonde hair, but no head, were discovered inside the valise. The valise was identified as belonging to Pearl Bryan. A man who had driven Pearl and her killers to the scene of the crime, and who even heard her scream before fleeing the spot, came forward and picked Jackson and Walling out of a lineup as the men who had hired him. Jackson and Walling denied their guilt on trial, too, but the jury didn't believe them, and they were hanged behind Newport's Campbell County Courthouse in Kentucky on March the 20th, 1897. Pearl's head was never found. No doubt her murderers were crudely trying to conceal her identity. But a more interesting question is, why did Walling help Jackson, only to end up going to his death? Perhaps, as Dorothy Dunbar suggests, they were more than just roommates? Final words on the scaffold? Jackson, I have nothing to say. Walling, I am not guilty. The case of Pearl Bryan caused a sensation, and a number of popular ballads were written about the unfortunate young woman. The ending of one is found in Blood in the Parlor. Pearl Bryan left her parents. On a dark and gloomy day, she went to meet the villain in a spot not far away. She thought it was the lover's hand that she could trust each day. Alas, it was a lover's hand that took her life away. A much longer ballad comes from the Viking book. Young girls, if you'll listen, a story I'll relate that happened near Fort Thomas in the old Kentucky state. On January the 31st, the dreadful deed was done by Jackson and by Walling. How cold Pearl's blood did run. But little did her parents think, when she left her happy home, their darling girl, just in her youth, would never more return. How sad it would have been to them to have heard Pearl's lonely voice at midnight in that lonely spot where those two boys rejoiced. And little did Pearl Bryan think, when she left her home that day, the grip she carried in her hand would hide her head away. She thought it was her lover's hand she could trust both night and day, although it was her lover's hand that took her life away. The driver in the seat is all who tells of Pearl's sad fate, of poor Pearl Bryan away from home in the old Kentucky state. Of her aged parents we all know well what a fortune they would give if Pearl could but to them return her natural life to live. In came Pearl Bryan's sister, and falling to her knees, begging to Scott Jackson, "My sister's head, oh please." Scott Jackson, he sat stubborn, not a word would he proclaim. "I'll meet my sister in heaven, where I'll find her missing head." In came Walling's mother, pleading for her son. "Don't take my son, my only son, from him I cannot part. Oh, please don't take him to prison, it would break my poor old heart." The jury gave a verdict, and to their feet they sprung. For the crime these boys committed, they surely must be hung. Let me know in the comments below if you would be interested in the backstory of some other murder ballads. There are lots of them. For those of you who wanted me to sing, and there are a few masochists out there, I put links to several recordings of folk songs about Pearl Bryan in the description, as well as a link to the book, The Mysterious Murder of Pearl Bryan, courtesy of Project Gutenberg. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music was Aftermath by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. Let me know if you think the music worked with the ballads, and thank you for listening.